been a busy weekend for me. I hope that y'all all had a restful weekend. And I thought that we'd start tonight by talking about what is healing. And in looking at what is healing, hang on, I'm having to tape something here. In looking at what is healing, we're going to go into that in a few minutes, but I think the first thing I wanted to do was just to reiterate some of the things that by now I think each of us knows, that wearing masks is good, that when we step outside, we want to be, as far away from people as possible. And this week I ended up singing happy birthday to my grandson, and I was in a room with a whole bunch of people, and that was the time I had to do that. So I jumped up and ran and put my face in the corner of the room, because I know that whenever you're singing or, eating, those are times when you're absolutely sharing more of what we don't want to be sharing with each other right now. So I think, I've been hearing people talking about pods, and, right now I think many of us are going to grocery stores and doing, being out in the public, and I think we all just have to sit and watch. We don't know what's going to happen. I'm hoping that with us all wearing masks out in public, that this is going to slow down. But I'm going to really suggest that you start thinking about having a pod. And I want to talk about this now in case things did get a lot worse. And a pod is just a small group of people that you are only around that group of people, and you don't go outside of that pod. I have friends here in Asheville who have already created pods with maybe, 1-2 families that are very close together, and they don't see anyone else except those people in their family, in those 2 families. They don't go out. They have, food delivered. So these are the kinds of things that I just want you to be aware that exists in case things did get worse. And they've certainly got worse for me already, because Jeffrey, you and my teacher were supposed to be coming down here in 2 weeks to teach. But the way it is in New York City now, when he flies back in, he would need to self-quarantine, and he, the 2 of us are both seeing patients now, so that wouldn't be a possibility for him. So he's not going to be coming down to Asheville, and a class that he has that has to do with Chinese medicine, the spirit of the meridians, which is something he's never taught before, is going to have to be live streamed. But we're looking forward to that still. But I was pretty disappointed that now I can't go to New York City, because if I get there and if I got caught, I would get fined. And they're now having people in the airports checking people who are coming in. So it's probably not the best thing to do. I had gotten to the point to where if you fly, I'm going to recommend that you do the same thing I do. There is still one airline that's not filling but 50% of the seats, and that's Delta. And I always check before I get on a plane to make sure that it's a plane that has HEPA filters in it. And the other thing I do is I get on, and I'm not talking about sanitizing a little bit, my entire chair, everything in front of me, the handles, down inside, I just am spraying everything. And then I have an N95 mask, and I've told all of my friends, don't take off your mask to drink water, don't take off your mask to eat food. There's no reason to do those things on an airplane. We just, so for those of you who may be like me and may have to travel some, make sure that those are things you really do pay attention to when you're traveling, and that you don't think that you need to eat a snack or drink a big bottle of water when it's a 2-hour flight. So just a few little things that I wanted to bring up before we started. One of the things that we've been talking about, and I wanted to talk about it more tonight, is what is healing, because I think that's a topic that all of us, have different views of. But from a Chinese medicine perspective, when we talk about what is healing, we're not talking about just the physical body, because we don't believe that it's possible to separate out just the physical body in Chinese medicine. So when we're talking about healing, we're talking about mind, body, and spirit. And, so the first thing I'm going to talk about right now is mind. And when we think about mentation in our mind and our ability to think, in Western culture, we think about the brain, okay? It's encapsulated within, our skull. But from a Chinese medicine perspective, we look on the brain as being a library. It's a storage container. It stores information, okay? But it's not our mind. Our mind, in so many writings in Chinese medicine, is referred to as the heart mind. And we believe in Chinese medicine that it is the heart that controls our ability to think and our ability to work through issues and to even to memorize. Memorize all of the things having to do with what we would consider the brain function in Chinese medicine may have to do with different organ systems. So, there is a part of memorizing that comes from the heart, but there's also a part of memorizing that comes from the spleen. And if the spleen qi is weak because of overstudying, then it becomes harder and harder to memorize things. So, in Chinese medicine, we speak of the heart mind because it's not that the brain is the organ that has the qi and the spirit to create our ability to think and to, it has more to do with just, not just our ability to think, but even who we are and how we store up and how we behave in the world. For example, we know that people have talked about having a cardiac transplant. And after that transplant, a family member may notice that things have changed. Maybe they like different foods, or maybe they are having some kind of emotional outreach to us that was not normal before, or little things about their personality change. And from a Chinese medicine perspective, we believe that that's because that part of our energy is also carried in the blood. And if you take the cardiac organ from one human to another, it's going to shift some things within them. So it's, we don't hear about a brain transplant. But that's where we think in the Western world is the seat of all of what we think, feel, learn. And yet from a Chinese medicine perspective, we believe that's all, has to do with the heart and the heart qi. So, we look at our mentation having a lot to do with our spirit. The other thing is, we look at what is healing as far as our physical health. And I think one of the things that bothers me the most is sometimes when I've heard people say, I'm sorry that, Kathy Lou had cancer and she died. She didn't heal. And if we carry that feeling that if someone dies and they didn't heal, it basically means that each one of us, as we die, is a failure. We weren't able to heal. And I think we need to shift that thought process that someone dies because they couldn't heal. Because the truth is, each one of us is going to die, okay? And the dying is not what's important in, within the larger context. I know it feels like it is because we tend to, this is the only world we know for sure. This is the one we can reach out and touch. So sometimes if we can't reach out and touch it and know it, it makes us afraid of what the future may bring. But, dying is going to touch each one of us at some point in time. And what I'm going to start recommending is that we not look on death as not being healed, because healing has so much more to do. What I would suggest, not so much from this body, but from our spirit and our heart mind. And so from my perspective, when I'm looking at what is healing, sometimes we may have a lot of regrets. And if I'm talking to someone and they're really sick, I'm going to kind of ask about those things. Do you have a lot of regrets? Is there something that you feel that you should have done or you should not have done in this lifetime? And, as soon as we start talking out about spirit and even heart-mind from a Chinese medicine perspective, we start talking about sometimes spirituality and how that impacts on us. And if we carry a lot of pain as we are approaching the end of our lives, and if we carry a lot of regret, then from a Chinese medicine perspective, that's going to block an easy and smooth transition. As crazy as it sounds, it's pretty funny. I just started to say, I'm still young, but it's, youth at this point. It's funny because one of the things I said to somebody last week is, oh, they're 70, oh, they're still young. And young changes a lot, when you're 68, oh, 70 is young. And I'm sure that some people are thinking, well, 80 is young. And everything that we are thinking about aging and everything that we carry with us about aging is part of societal influences on us, that as we age, we are not going to be as sharp mentally. We're not going to be able to continue doing some of the things we were doing earlier in life. And sometimes we don't continue to do those things. But part of that is that something else becomes more important. And, even I'm starting to see for myself that, I took the time this year to plant some plants that in a couple of years I'm going to be able to harvest my own green tea and then look at how to process that. And so in some ways it could look like I'm slowing down because I'm not out running triathlons, or I'm not out skiing or snowboarding. But there's a part of that also becomes a part that really nourishes our spirit. And as we get older, I think that sometimes the slowing down is not so much that our body, is it's not like we're out of sync with our body, but it's that sometimes the spirit is becoming more important as we're aging. So someone just asked me, how do I see the connection between healing the individual, our individual mind, body, spirits, and the social, the world around us, and all of the connections that we have. And they're talking about how much suffering there is right now, whether it's due to Black Lives Matter or due to the disconnection that we're feeling from COVID. And just looking at, those two issues right there, this is a time that I believe is calling us to really look within and, with each one of us transforming ourselves, I believe that helps to transform the world. And so, I believe right now, as people are having to stay home, I've seen more and more people self-reflecting and looking, at themselves. Being a woman who was raised in the very deep South, as I say, I don't want to carry guilt about what happened, and what my ancestors did, but I need to recognize that, we are the ones that enslaved a group of people and took them out of their homeland. And then we are a group that basically tried to destroy the American Indians by taking their children away from them. And these are just part of the facts, and there's always going to be pain in life. And I don't want to negate Black Lives Matter or the seriousness of COVID right now. But what I do want to say is that if each one of us looks within and takes care of our own feelings and realizes, when I just got nervous walking down the street and a man was walking towards me that I did not know, was I a little bit more nervous with an African American man than a white man? That's because of the racism that was taught. And so we each have to look at areas in our own life where we may carry some racism that's been engraved. But my belief is that if each one of us looks individually and works on our own self, and yet we also support each other socially, that, life will change and become better. I may be a really Pollyanna, but these are hard questions, and each one of us has to look at those. And the way we look at the difficulties in life is very different based on our belief system. If I was a Confucianist, then the society is what's important, and it is the most important thing. And yet if I was a Taoist, then what's important is my own heart, mind, and my spirit, and that if I take care of that, it grows by everyone that I touch and maybe helps them, because each of us is healing on many different levels. And there's no one here that gets out without having trauma in their life. And we all walk around sometimes feeling like we're different because of the traumas. But the truth is many of us have experienced the same traumas. And when I say that, I am not saying that a white woman has experienced the same trauma as a black woman. That's not true from my perspective. But as far as how to deal with that, I don't believe it's a big, big issue. I think that what we start to do is look at each individual that we meet and how we meet each person and how they feel when we walk away from them is what's the most important. If I go in and I get aggravated with the cashier because she can't figure out what a vegetable is, which is interesting. Some of the vegetables I buy, I go up and they look at me and say, what's this? And particularly like if you're in Ingalls where they have some different vegetables. But, you know, every one of us is meeting someone each and every day. And all of us are fragile. And if we leave that person and they're feeling good because someone nourished them, you know, it makes a big difference in our life, and that helps to heal the planet. If I go up to a person and who's checking me out at a store, you may have heard me say this before, sometimes we walk away from that person and you think, oh man, I'm glad, man, she was in a bad mood. But other times we walk away because someone has just said, oh, that's such a beautiful shirt you have on. Her. Oh, you look like you've had a good day. And it's amazing how just these little kind words that people say touch our heart and touch our spirit. So I don't have an answer for how each one of us can take and heal, you know, but what we do see is there's a lot of suffering on the planet. And so our job is that whoever we meet that day is to try and leave them knowing that we saw them and we honored them. And I don't mean like, you know, saying the honor, but there's a way that we can speak to someone that knows that we've seen them. So I'm going back to the body and, you know, how things get transformed within our body. And in Chinese medicine, there's this chicken and egg thing. It's like, does the emotion create the illness, or does the illness create the emotion? And, you know, I've talked about if something's happening that all of a sudden I get really angry, it's possible that my blood pressure could go up and I could end up with a headache or a migraine. It's also possible that I could walk into Home Depot and stand around in an area where there's a lot of toxic chemicals on the wood that I'm buying, and then I could leave, and because of how that's impacted my liver, that I might get short-tempered. And so, you know, our healing of our body, we can't just look at what's going on that physical plane, but we have to look at what's happening on an emotional plane. And there is a point where each one of us is going to approach death, and how we approach that has to do with how at peace we are with our life. And, you know, I always joke, or maybe I don't joke, and say, I'm probably going to go out in a blazing, fiery way because I have so much fire, I carry so much of the fire element. But there is a blessing to knowing that once we are approaching death, dying is not, whether we die or not is not signify whether we're healed. But dying is just that transition, you know, I believe, from one plane to another. Not sure what that plane is. I know this one because I can reach out and touch it. But if I can leave this world with a sense of peace and with a sense of I did good while I was here, then from my perspective, that's a person who's healed. And part of it has to do with healing relationships. And, I tell people sometimes, you don't have to go to everyone to heal a relationship. You can heal relationships without going and talking to a person. If there was someone that you feel really injured you as a child or, even as an adult, what we carry about that person impacts our ability to live free. Because if we're carrying resentment or hatred or disgust about another human, then it's impacting us and our heart. So what I talk with people about who may have issues like this is, how do you heal for yourself, not requiring anything from that other person? Because some people may never be able to take responsibility and say, I'm sorry for this. But that doesn't mean that you can't step beyond and basically forgive that person whether or not they've said they're sorry. And so that's one of the things that I look on as being part of healing, is not carrying unresolved, issues with others to our grave. And again, it doesn't mean that they're going to necessarily meet you, but it's us going within our heart and finding a place to let go of that pain. I think, my mother said to me one time about, she felt that as a child my life had been difficult. And what I said to my mother is, I wouldn't change any of it, because if we would go back and change those things, in some ways we're saying who we are is not okay. And I think we all need to be able to look at ourselves now and realize that who I am right now is okay. The minute we start looking at that, then it allows us to be free from all of the pain and suffering we may have experienced sometimes. And I think that's one of the most important things that I would say to anyone, is that if we're looking back on the things that injured us and we've not been able to move beyond it, then what we're saying is, who I am right now is not okay. And, I may have some responses whenever I see something that, reminds me of something that may have been difficult for me as a child. But by looking at that, person who's in both places, it gives you sometimes the ability to have compassion. And, I speak a lot now, or I think I speak a lot about having compassion, for our president. I know that he's creating a lot of discord in the world, but I look at the pain that he must be going through in his own life that has put him in this place. And I feel like he probably didn't have the blessing that I had of a mother who always loved me and let me know that. But all of these things all come together, and you can't really separate. I can't separate out someone who is creating pain in the world right now and look at them and say they're a horrible person. They may be doing some things that are what I look on as being really bad, but you know, that's only because of where they came from and because they were not loved and they didn't have someone supporting their heart, mind, and their spirit. They had people that didn't do that. So, you know, in talking about healing, I believe that we're all in charge of our healing. And I don't believe that having a long life means that you're healed. Some people may live to 100, and you know their telomeres or whatever they are, you know, their genetics, their gene essence is strong, but how you live your life every day has to do with whether you are healed when you leave this earth. And that doesn't matter whether you're 5 or 105. That has to do with what you carry within you, not, you know, how your body is functioning. But I think, you know, we think of health as being not having pain, not having headaches. And, you know, these bodies get hurt. I mean, I think many of you may know that I have a torn meniscus right now. And, you know, I could come up with all kinds of psychological, emotional, spiritual reasons why I hurt my knee. But right now, I need to work on getting out of pain in my knee, but I don't need to also start looking and blaming myself for, oh my goodness, what was I doing that hurt this knee? And I think we have so much blame for people around illness, and we have so little compassion for people who are struggling. And every one of us struggles with something, okay? And, you know, I don't believe that a person who is having a lot of health problems is any less than someone maybe who's struggling because they're having a hard time financially. All of us have struggles of one type or another. None of us get out of here without some type of growth that we're looking at and reaching for, whether it's how to be more financially stable, how to have better health, how to have maybe a significant other, a loving relationship. But again, part of this has to do with not just having, you know, compassion for others, but also compassion for ourselves. And what I'm going to suggest is that everyone tonight, when we leave here, that you really look at what you say inside your head to yourself. Because I think that self-talk that we do is the biggest thing that each of us may need to heal. And to look at the things you say inside your mind. And I tell people, we talk about the things that we eat sometimes can create ill health. And I'm going to tell you that the things that we eat emotionally create so much more ill health than what we basically are eating. My teacher said many times that, you know, it's the guilt of what we eat that creates our problems more so than the food sometimes. But I'd certainly say it's more about the emotional stuff that we're eating than the self-talk that we have. These are the things that healing for me comes with where our hearts are. And it's not about this body, because this body is transient. And I hope that when I get to the point to where I'm moving towards the end of my life, and if I know it, or if I don't know it, if it happens, you know, tomorrow in some accident or some strange physical thing that we didn't expect. It's like being at peace when I leave here is what creates healing. And how healed you are is how much you go through each day feeling at peace with yourself and with others. And I'll leave it at that. So, if there are any questions, I don't have the answers, but I like to commiserate with my friends, so I would certainly be willing to go there. But I think the number one thing I'm going to say is that it is our heart-mind, it's not our brain that determines who we are, and we have to meet everyone with compassion and love. So thank you, and I hope you have a good